I never thought a single text could shatter the life I'd carefully built. We need to talk. I think it's time we go our separate ways. It was from him, Daniel, my husband of 7 years. The man I had trusted with everything, from my heart to my finances, had been planning a divorce behind my back. And worse, he hadn't just decided to leave, he was already strategizing how to take it all, our savings, the house, the investments I had spent years building. I am Aisha, and up until that moment, I believed in the image of a perfect marriage. We were the couple everyone admired, successful careers, social gatherings, vacations, and shared dreams. Daniel had been charming, attentive, even loving, or at least that's what I had thought. But the text revealed a hidden truth. Beneath his polished exterior, he had been calculating, manipulative, and ready to betray me when it suited him best. The first unease came earlier that week, though I hadn't recognized it at the time. Small changes in his behavior, furtive phone calls, vague explanations for late nights at work, subtle annoyance whenever I discussed finances, simmered in my mind like shadows. I brushed them off, telling myself I was imagining things, or that stress had clouded my judgment. But now, reading his confession in black and white, the pieces aligned. I could see the pattern. Every small deception, every lie, every slight dismissal of my questions had been rehearsals, preparing him for this moment. He thought he could quietly erase me from the life we shared, leaving me with heartbreak and nothing else. I felt a cold, sharp surge of anger and clarity. I wasn't about to let him succeed. My mind raced as I considered my options. The bank accounts, the investments, the assets that Daniel had assumed were within his grasp, I would move them, shield them, protect what was mine. 1 week, I told myself. 1 week would be enough to secure everything before he realized what was happening. And yet, even as I began to strategize, a subtle suspicion lingered. How had he planned this so quietly? Who had he spoken to? Had someone else been feeding him advice, guiding his betrayal? The questions gnawed at me, feeding both my anxiety and my determination. By the time I hung up my phone, clutching the damning message, I had made a decision. Daniel would not walk away with a single victory. He had underestimated me, believing I was naive, compliant, and unaware. He was wrong. And the storm I was about to unleash would prove it. Even before Daniel's confession, the warning signs had been there, subtle but persistent. Now, in hindsight, I could see them as pieces of a larger puzzle. The first red flag was money. Minor discrepancies at first, small transfers he couldn't explain, unapproved charges, sudden withdrawals. I had trusted him implicitly, so I'd assumed they were mistakes or forgotten expenses. But as I scanned through old statements after his text, patterns emerged. Months of unexplained adjustments, cleverly disguised to appear normal. He had been chipping away at our shared finances while I slept, confident no one would notice. Then there were the calls. Long, whispered conversations late at night, conversations he would end abruptly whenever I entered the room. Sometimes he'd step out, claiming it was work-related, but his hurried explanations felt hollow. He avoided eye contact, his hands twitching as if hiding something. And when I asked direct questions, his irritation flared quickly, leaving me feeling like the unreasonable one. Favoritism, too, had begun to rear its head. Daniel started praising certain friends or colleagues, brushing off my opinions as naive or uninformed. Every compliment he gave to someone else felt like a quiet jab at me. I tried to rationalize it. Was I overthinking? Was my insecurities amplifying nothing? But deep down, something didn't feel right. Even our social interactions changed. At dinners with friends or family, he would subtly undermine me, correcting minor facts I mentioned, steering conversations away from topics where I had expertise, dropping hints that I was not experienced enough to handle certain decisions. The unease grew, gnawing at my confidence. Emotionally, the strain was crushing. Nights were sleepless, mornings heavy with anxiety. I questioned myself constantly, Was I imagining his deception? Was I overreacting? The text confirming his divorce plan had ignited a storm of betrayal, but before that, these subtle behaviors had already begun eroding my trust, making me second-guess my own judgment. The suspicion that perhaps he had been planning this for months, maybe years, lingered. Every smile, every casual remark, every small act of dismissal now felt rehearsed, deliberate. I realized I had been living in a house that wasn't entirely mine, not because of possessions, but because of control. I could feel my patience fraying, my emotions taut like a tightly wound spring. The betrayal was not yet fully revealed, but the tension was undeniable. Daniel may have thought he was clever, thinking he could manipulate me quietly, but each secret call, each unexplained expense, each subtle slight was another thread in a web I was beginning to unravel. And I knew one thing for certain, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The quiet storm was forming, and I had to decide, would I stay trapped in his narrative, or would I take control before he made his move? I should have seen it coming, but the truth still hit me like a freight train. Daniel wasn't just planning to leave me, he was planning to leave with everything. The savings account I had built meticulously over the years? Gone, or at least he had been quietly transferring large sums elsewhere. The stocks and investments we had discussed together? Secretly liquidated in his name. Even the property I had inherited from my parents had been subtly manipulated, his name quietly added to documents I never signed. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the evidence sprawled before me, transfer confirmations, altered legal documents, emails to his lawyer discussing strategies for claiming assets without my knowledge. I couldn't breathe at first. My heart pounded. My hands shook. How could the man I loved, the man I had trusted completely, be capable of such calculated betrayal? Shock gave way to disbelief. Months of small red flags, subtle dismissals, late-night calls, they were all pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was solving. Every time I questioned him, every time I doubted my instincts, he had cleverly positioned himself to appear innocent, to make me feel guilty for suspecting him. The realization made my stomach churn. Then came the anger, fierce and burning. He had thought I would be blindsided, humiliated, and powerless. He had assumed I would silently accept his manipulations, quietly accept that the house, the bank accounts, the investments, all that I had worked for, would slip from my grasp. But he had underestimated me. Deeply. I slammed my laptop shut, my mind racing. I remembered every sly comment about my naivete in financial matters, every time he subtly undermined my confidence, every carefully rehearsed story about expenses that made me second-guess myself. All of it had been deliberate. Calculated. Planned. I couldn't help but feel a cold clarity wash over me. This wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy, manipulation at the highest level. And he had left a trail, believing it would never be discovered. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think clearly. Crying wouldn't undo months of theft and lies. Panic wouldn't reclaim what was mine. I needed a plan, a precise, deliberate strategy that would expose him and secure my assets permanently. One thought echoed in my mind, steady and relentless: he had made the first move, thinking I would crumble. He had no idea what I was capable of. The heartbreak was still there, sharp and raw. But it was no longer paralyzing. It was fuel. Fuel for the storm I was about to unleash, a storm designed to strip him of the control he had believed was his. And as I began organizing the evidence, tracing every transaction, documenting every lie, I realized something terrifyingly powerful: revenge wouldn't just be satisfying, it would be inevitable. The man who had plotted my financial ruin had underestimated me. And now, the game had changed. I sat in my office, the evening sun casting long shadows across the floor, my fingers trembling as I reviewed the evidence once more. Months of deception, stolen money, and manipulated documents lay before me, a damning testament to Daniel's betrayal. The heartbreak that had once left me paralyzed now simmered into something else, sharp, focused determination. The trigger moment came when I opened a folder labeled Joint Investments, only to find account numbers that didn't exist, accounts he had secretly transferred our funds to, accounts he believed I would never discover. I remembered all the times I had asked simple questions. Where is this money going? Did we pay that off? And each time, he had dismissed me with a smile, telling me I was too anxious or overthinking. He had mocked my instincts. He had underestimated me. And suddenly, everything crystallized. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a challenge. He had thrown down a gauntlet, assuming I would cower. But I wasn't going to. Not anymore. I rose from my chair, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The hurt, the disbelief, the sleepless nights, they all transformed into resolve. I realized that I could fight back, not with rash emotion, but with precision, patience, and strategy. The tools were already in my hands: documentation, witnesses, bank statements, and legal counsel. I simply needed to execute a plan that would leave no doubt of his treachery. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. Each moment of fear or sadness became fuel for focus. Every memory of his casual dismissals, every sly smile that masked his greed, became reminders that I needed to reclaim what was mine. I was no longer a victim of circumstance, I was a strategist in a game of justice. I began drafting my plan on paper, step by step. Secure the accounts. Consult the lawyer. Gather corroborating statements. Document every lie, every suspicious transaction, every act of manipulation. The list was meticulous, but it made me feel alive, in control, and unshakably strong. A wave of calm replaced the anxiety that had gripped me for weeks. Daniel thought he had orchestrated everything perfectly, that he had won before the game had even begun. But he had underestimated me. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled, not because the betrayal no longer hurt, but because I knew I would rise from it stronger. I would not just survive. I would reclaim everything. The storm was coming. And Daniel would never see it coming. Part 5 of 7, Revenge Planning. By the next morning, my grief had hardened into discipline. I didn't rush. Rushing was how people made mistakes, and Daniel thrived on other people's mistakes. I needed precision. Step 1 was proof. Real proof. Not assumptions. Not emotions. Facts that couldn't be argued away. I started with the bank. Quietly. I requested full transaction histories for every joint account, cross-checking dates against moments I remembered clearly, business trips that never happened, late meetings that suddenly made sense. I created a timeline, color-coded, clean. Red for transfers. Blue for lies. Black for silence. The pattern was undeniable. Step 2 was witnesses. I reached out to our financial advisor under the guise of updating my records. His voice tightened when I asked about accounts in my husband's name only, accounts funded by money that should have been jointly approved. He didn't accuse Daniel outright, but his pauses said enough. I asked for written summaries. He complied. Step 3 was legal insulation. I met with a lawyer Daniel had never met, never vetted. I said very little at first. I let the documents speak. By the time I finished, the lawyer leaned back and said 4 words that sent a chill through me: "He thinks you're clueless." Good. Meanwhile, Daniel walked around like a man who believed the ending was already written. He hummed while making coffee. He talked casually about starting fresh and keeping things civil. He had no idea I had already secured my personal accounts, frozen joint withdrawals with a single signature clause he'd forgotten existed, and documented everything. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I laid traps. I asked harmless questions. I watched him lie smoothly, confidently, lies that now contradicted bank records I had printed and stored in 3 separate places. I sent calm texts. Neutral emails. I wanted him comfortable. Overconfident. The tension built quietly, like pressure behind glass. At night, while he slept beside me, I reviewed files on my phone with the brightness turned all the way down. Each page felt like tightening a noose, not around his neck, but around his narrative. When the truth finally came out, there would be nowhere for him to stand. He still thought he was in control. He didn't know that the meeting had been scheduled. He didn't know the documents were ready. He didn't know I had stopped reacting and started calculating. And that was the most dangerous version of me he could face. Because the plan was no longer about revenge fueled by anger. It was about exposure fueled by truth. And once the first domino fell, the rest would collapse on their own. The climax was coming. And Daniel was smiling, right up until the moment he wouldn't be able to anymore. The moment arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind Daniel loved because ordinary made him careless. I told him we were meeting the lawyer together to discuss an amicable separation. That word, amicable, made him relax. He wore confidence like a tailored suit, kissed my cheek, and said, "This will be quick." He was right about one thing. The conference room was cold, glass walls reflecting Daniel's smug expression back at him. He sat first, legs crossed, already rehearsing the version of the story where he was generous, reasonable, in control. Then my lawyer walked in. Not his. Mine. Daniel's smile flickered. Before he could speak, my lawyer slid a thick folder across the table. "Let's begin with the financial disclosures." Daniel laughed. "I already handled those." "Yes," my lawyer replied calmly, "you thought you did." The first document landed like a gunshot, bank transfers from joint accounts into shell accounts under Daniel's name. Dates. Amounts. Authorization clauses violated. The second document followed emails to his brother discussing how to move things before she catches on. The third, statements from the financial advisor confirming Daniel knowingly misrepresented marital assets. Daniel's color drained fast. He stammered. Denied. Tried to joke. Tried to charm. Then he saw the final page. A notarized confirmation showing I had legally moved my assets 1 week before his divorce filing, perfectly within my rights, perfectly documented. His plan to leave me financially stranded had already failed before it began. "You emptied the accounts," he snapped. I leaned forward, steady. "No. I protected myself. You emptied us." That's when the door opened again. His parents. They had been invited for mediation. Instead, they watched the truth unfold in real time. His mother covered her mouth. His father stared at the papers like they were written in another language. "You lied to us," his father said quietly. Daniel exploded. Accusations. Shouting. Desperation. The confident man I married collapsed into a frantic stranger, grasping for control that no longer existed. The final blow came when my lawyer calmly explained the consequences: asset recovery, fraud penalties, court sanctions. His accounts were already flagged. His access restricted. Financial collapse, triggered by his own betrayal. Daniel stood up too fast, chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You planned this." I met his eyes. "No. You did." "I just read the script." Security escorted him out after his outburst echoed down the hallway. Phones were already buzzing, family members, business partners, people asking questions he couldn't answer. As the door closed behind him, silence filled the room. The glass walls reflected me this time, calm, upright, unbroken. The man who planned to divorce me and take everything walked out with nothing but his lies. And the story he thought he controlled? It had just been exposed to the light. The days after the courtroom revelation felt surreal. Daniel's name was whispered in shock and disbelief at social gatherings, in offices, even among our mutual friends. The man who had once carried himself with an air of untouchable confidence had become a cautionary tale, his deceit and greed exposed for all to see. Family and colleagues who had once admired him now distanced themselves, leaving him isolated in the very world he had thought he controlled. For me, the aftermath was liberation. I had reclaimed everything, my finances, my assets, and most importantly, my sense of self. The weight of fear, uncertainty, and betrayal lifted, replaced by an unshakable strength. I walked with my head high, not because I sought revenge, but because I had protected my life from being stolen and reclaimed my dignity. Even more satisfying was the poetic justice. Daniel had spent months plotting a divorce to take everything from me, believing he was clever and untouchable. Every lie, every hidden account, every manipulation had been meticulously designed to make me vulnerable. Yet, it was those same actions that became the evidence of his downfall. The man who tried to destroy me financially and emotionally had built the framework for his own collapse. I often think back to that moment in the conference room, the calm, deliberate presentation of truth, the look on his face as the layers of his deception peeled away. The man who had underestimated me had unknowingly handed me the tools for my victory. To anyone watching this story, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Have you faced manipulation or deceit that left you questioning your instincts? Share your experiences in the comments. Your story matters, and your resilience is proof that betrayal can be met with strength, strategy, and justice. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of triumph, exposure, and the power of reclaiming your life. And here's the line that still sends shivers down my spine. The man who tried to take everything from me spent years building a fortress of lies, and the very walls he raised became the cage that trapped him. He plotted my defeat. I orchestrated his undoing. And in the silence after the storm, I found freedom, power, and truth.